Hey girl, Marissa here. You are listening to the Codependent Dummy podcast. As a young woman, you have been raised, reinforced, and rewarded for putting the needs of others above your own. Now, in your 20s, you're finding yourself exhausted, exasperated, and enveloped in shit relationships, especially the one you have with yourself. Codependency is a way of being where we put the feelings, wants, and needs of others above our own in an unconscious attempt to meet our own feelings, wants, and needs. Sorry to break it to you, sis, but that is not sustainable. This podcast is to help you undo all that so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. Let's get to it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Codependent Dummy podcast. Today, we are graced with the presence of Kim Bielak. Kim is an associate marriage and family therapist in Los Angeles and currently supervised by licensed marriage and family therapist Chris Tickner. Kim works both with individuals and couples through a highly integrative, holistic, and mindfulness-centered approach to help clients slow down, relax their grip, and use curiosity and openness to explore the patterns that are currently holding them back. Kim has spent time as a former yoga teacher and life, career, and executive coach, all of which have contributed to additional perspectives from places like somatic psychology and positive psychology, which she brings into her work. Kim, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I love your bio, like the letting go, slowing down. I had to read it just like that because that's how I read it when I first read it. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's something I do to remind myself to slow down. I'm very much like a lot of clients who walk through my door, go, very anxious, very whatever, right? And I found that it works for me to slow down and get curious. And that's a lot of what I end up bringing. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, first question. Through your lens as a therapist, we'll put your therapist hat on and your coach and yoga background as well. How do you conceptualize codependency?
Yeah. So I think one of my biggest philosophies as a therapist, and a lot of people hold this these days, is the idea that, any client who walks through my door, whatever symptoms, patterns, things they're experiencing, is really considering it adaptive to some extent, right? Not, this is something that's pathological. It's something that you learned over time to help you get your needs met or to survive, right? So the very first thing that I'm always asking and getting really curious about, whether it's codependency or anything else, is what was the need that you were trying to get met? And where did you learn? How did you learn that this was the best way to get that need met, right?
Wow.
So yeah, with codependency, right, we're often considering it, or understanding it as a way in which, people maybe aren't holding their needs in equal weight with others, right? It's a way of self-sacrificing or self-abandoning or self-negating. Yeah, the problem is, you're doing that to an extent today, but the way you learned to do all of that in order to get a fundamental need met, oftentimes early in life, right? So that might be to be connected, right? To be loved or fed or nourished, right? This again often has to do with attachment early in life, right? So I'll give you just even a couple examples. Everybody's going to be very different, but let's consider this, right? Maybe mom had depression early in life or something like that, right? You learned very early that, your need was not going to get met by, having needs, your needs were going to get met if you comforted mom, right? If you were there for her, if you were whatever, right? You tended to, you took care of in order to make sure you stayed connected to her because she was maybe a little absent, right? Or let's say maybe dad, right? Maybe had anger issues, maybe had substance use issues, right? These are all, just examples again, right? But you learn learned to stay connected to you, whoever the primary caregiver was that you needed to be fed, to be loved, to be kept safe, right? Maybe you had to be really small in that situation, right? You couldn't cry, you couldn't make your needs known or big, right? You learned to stifle them, to sacrifice them in order to stay connected to that primary caregiver that you were dependent on, right? So just a couple of examples, right? Everyone's going to be different, but it's a way of understanding this as, oh my God, that's actually pretty crazy that, at the age of 5, at the age of, before we could even walk or talk, our bodies, our minds, we naturally adapted in order to make sure that we were cared for, right? That's pretty freaking amazing. So I like to really help clients understand that's
amazing.
It's amazing that we can do that. Problem is later on in life, right? That's not you shouldn't have been made to, function in that way. And it's not serving you any longer, right? It's not fair to you to have to sacrifice your needs for others. So we have a lot of unlearning and undoing to do, right? But we don't have to pathologize it. We can actually say that's pretty amazing.
I love that. Well, first of all, I use patient or client interchangeably. So every client who walks into your door, your perspective is whatever they're bringing. If it is codependency, this is adaptive.
Mm-hmm.
This is amazing. Mm-hmm. It's amazing that you were able to figure out how to ultimately stay connected.
Right. It's
long term.
Resourceful. Yeah. It's a strength. And it's a strength that is maybe out of balance, right? We also, there's nothing wrong with wanting to take care of others, worry about other people's needs, right? Stay in connection, all of that stuff. That's beautiful. The fact that, when we talk about people who have codependent tendencies, right? They're often very highly empathetic, empathic, all of this good stuff, right? The problem is the strength is kind of just again out of balance, right? Or it's sacrificing something else. So we need to bring the balance back.
Right. Yeah. I think one major theme on the podcast thus far is how I've heard it said different ways, but the extremes that codependents tend to go to on spectrums, we're just way over on either side. No integration, no balance. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah. All right. And I'm curious about personally in your life, do you have any codependent experiences to share with us?
Yeah, I can definitely talk a little about that. And it's funny, I don't think I would have used the term codependency before I started, rethinking about it under that lens for to chat with you. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a great way to describe it. So what I'll say is kind of, I, as a lot of people, but one of many who has had a history of dating quote unquote emotionally unavailable people, right? And I don't think at the time I had any idea what that meant because it was really confusing to describe it that way. I was like beating my head against the wall, right? Why, do people think I'm dating emotionally unavailable people? I'm not. I'm very emotional and, empathic and all of this stuff. So what would happen was the people I would date or be with, right, they would very much open up to me, right? It was a lot of, vulnerability and letting, sides of themselves be shown to me that maybe they didn't show other people. And it was for me as who, later became a therapist, because this is, just my world and what I like to do. I loved that part of relationships, right? Was being, I'm special. They'll open up to me. I can help them. I can fix them. I can save them, right? Very much that mentality. What I think one of the biggest insights I've had recently, right, is this idea of it's emotionally available to me. You'll open up to me, but you're not emotionally available for me. Big
Mm.
difference. This is about you,
Wow.
not about me, right? So in all of those situations, okay, we would, get to the emotional level, be vulnerable, we do whatever, but nobody was worrying about me and what I needed in the relationship. And that, I wanted to be in a relationship or the safety and security of XYZ. I would definitely write off my own needs and be, that kind of person who, oh, I don't need a label, or I don't need to, they don't need to be so concerned about me, right? So in that way, it was a form of codependency. It was a form of, right, for me to feel connected, loved, special, all of those things was to meet other people's needs and then totally ignore my own, right?
Right.
This kind of lasted up until, I did a lot of work around relationships and love.
Mm.
If anyone's unfamiliar, two books I really, really love in this area: All About Love by Bell Hooks, and then The Art of Loving by Eric Fromm. And both of these
I
books
love Eric Fromm.
he's amazing. He's absolutely amazing. Yeah. And so he really influenced bell hooks, right? And so the whole idea was the art of loving, right? It's not just a feeling, it's actually active. It's a verb here, right? So we often consider love in terms of an object, right? Who will, meet my needs or satisfy this, desire I have, versus it actually being a very active verb, to love, right? Rather to fall in love and just have a feeling. So I got really into this, and I got really into
Mm.
the idea of I'm going to really love people and really act and do all of that. And I got really involved in this one relationship, and to no hard feelings with him at all today. He's a wonderful person, but I threw myself in, and in a way that I was giving, because this is what I had just learned love was too, right? Was to act and to actively give. And one form of that was to be the person who said, I love you first, right? I was like, this is a way that I will show that I love you,
Mm.
is to put myself out there so you don't have to, right? And of course, this is one of those relationships that was met with a thank you. And that's
Mm.
fine, right? That happens. But it was after that, in the breakup kind of process and going to therapy and working through that, my therapist asked me the simplest question. You would think it's so obvious, but she said, it seems like you gave so much. That is so, so beautiful. Do you feel like he gave back as much? And until that point, it had never even crossed my mind. Was that equal, or was that balanced? Was I receiving love in the same amount that I was giving it, right?
Right.
And from that point over, on, this is, how I think about relationships and love, is there has to be this level of equality, right? In terms of your need,
Mhm.
giving and receiving. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. As you're sharing, I totally resonate. And also, right, that extreme sometimes that we
Mhm.
codependents we take on, right? Where
Yeah.
it is just all or nothing, or just we're
All or
all
nothing.
give,
Mhm.
no receiving. Yeah, just those extremes.
Yeah. And I think that's
Mhm.
something, right? Like all of us, have a little bit of this kind of black and white, all or nothing kind of approach to life, right? It's something that a lot of us, it takes time to be able to hold, both and rather than either or. And yeah, some of us just, it takes a little bit longer. We do it a little bit more extreme for a while, but I think that is right. It's globally to be able to readjust and find a middle ground versus the extremes, versus the all or nothing. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
important.
Yeah. And I have one question. I feel like there's been like whispers or some exploration, but I would like your perspective on how do you sense, Kim, in your experience being with, I love it, you're like quote unquote emotionally unavailable people.
Uh-huh.
How do you, looking back, sense that in your codependency you were indeed emotionally unavailable too?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question. The first thing that comes to mind is probably emotionally unavailable for myself. So that's what I expected from partners, right? Because I didn't know what that meant. I didn't, I had a wonderful childhood family, nothing against them, right? But emotional vocabulary wasn't huge there, I don't think, right? It wasn't. I got really involved in school and work, and kind of perfectionist tendencies arose. And it was just because that was how I understood the world, and my worth was to get the A or to do a good job on XYZ, rather than to understand what it felt like to be, validated or thought about how does this make you feel, and all of that stuff, right? So I think it was just not even knowing what those needs were, and to look for them and to ask for them, right? That I think can be an entire process and that's, what started to happen when I got into therapy, was the therapist would ask me about my needs and my wants and my feelings. And it's, oh, I never thought about that. It's such a simple question, right? So to be more emotionally available for yourself, right, requires you to step back and take a look at some of that stuff. I'll say this too, and I can speak a little bit more about how this shows up in couples, right? But it's similar to the kind of extremes, right? We vacillate between the sense of filling other people's needs and then also being very independent, right? Can actually be, I think, a form of codependency, because it's the sense that I don't want to get lost in you, right? Therefore, I can't balance the both and of holding myself and staying in connection. I have to, cut off, some extent of emotional availability or closeness, right? It's the sense that, in order to, and this is again where I think being young and you're very influenced by the messages you hear in the media and stuff like that. For me, it was a lot about, oh, don't get attached, don't get too, don't lose yourself in a relationship, very feminist and good, well-intentioned, right? Was to, you focus on you and your job and all of this stuff first before you let someone else, take that all away from you, right? That's an extreme way of thinking about it. So for me, I also was closed off to letting people be close or emotionally available, right? It was a focus on I'm independent and I will, serve and help and love you, kind of a thing. Yeah.
Right. So covertly emotionally unavailable while being so available for someone else. Yeah. No, it's so, like I said, like I've heard utterings, or I think I've even talked about it in previous episodes, but really trying to look at, I feel like, pointing the finger, and how are three pointing back at me? So it's like, I keep dating emotionally unavailable people, but it's like, but how am I emotionally unavailable?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that took me some time for me to figure out.
Yeah. Okay. So shifting to your work with couples, what are some ways you deal with codependency as it shows up with them and in their relationships?
Yeah. It's a great question, because I think, we can naturally just really focus on the individual, right? When it comes to something like codependency, okay, why can't you focus more on your needs or be stronger, or get out of it or whatever? When the reality is, these relationships, there's a dynamic always, right? So, our patterns interact with our partner's patterns, or whoever it is that we're in relationship with at any given point in time, whatever we're codependent relationship with, right? So it's a two-way street here, right? And I think oftentimes in couples, when there is some sense of codependency, both partners are very dependent on each other to an extent, right? You might have someone, right, on the other side having maybe more narcissistic tendencies, just as an example, right? They're still very dependent in that relationship on their sense of self-esteem and self-worth and validation. That is how they use, right, their partner in a way to get that need met, right? Same with substance use or something like that. The partner maybe really takes care of that person to the extent that they can't take care of themselves, right? They're always cleaning up and picking up the pieces after them, right? They are dependent on that relationship to survive, right? So off the bat, we see that a big part of codependency is an enmeshed dynamic in a relationship, right? So the first thing that I do when I see something like that with a couple is to explore boundaries and help them differentiate. And that's a very specific word that we actually use, Marissa, in therapy and as therapists, differentiation. It's a big concept that comes from Bowen family systems.
Love Bowen.
David Snarch too wrote Passionate Marriage. It's this idea, it's exactly what I referred to earlier, the both and. The balance and ability, the closest I can get, right, to balance, holding myself while also staying in connection with someone else, right? It's a both and, it's not an either or. So, right, in codependency, we'll often see the side of holding myself get sacrificed, right? I have to sacrifice myself in order to stay connected to you. But we'll also see what I said before, right, is the alternative sometimes too. If someone notices they're codependent, right, they'll really pull back to the opposite side of the spectrum. And they'll say, in order to hold myself and in order to, maintain the sense of individuality and independence, I have to become so independent that I cannot stay in connection with you either. I have to put up a big wall, or I have to have a really rigid boundary, right? So oftentimes we vacillate between this either or in us versus the ability to connect. And this idea of differentiation is not to just separate, it's to separate enough where you can hold yourself and still stay connected, right? So explain
Isn't
a
that
lot.
so interesting? Differentiate.
Yeah.
But you're making things different, but it's actually connected.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually don't know where the word or term itself comes from, which is why I go out of my way to explain it, because it does sound like you're just pulling apart, right?
Right.
And part of it is that, right, is exploring, where do I end and you begin, right? And this is a process we do, not only with our partners, it's something we have to do with our primary caregivers, with our families, right? We have to be able to get to the point where we can, maybe launch off and fly the coop and do whatever, but not completely emotionally cut off. And,
Right.
we're no longer in connection with our families. Now, of course, that very person dependent in the family you come from, but in a healthy, right, dynamic here, right? We're still connected with our families of origin. We're still connected with our primary caregivers without being dependent on them and without being completely cut off from them, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I cut you off. So you were talking about differentiation. How do you work with couples?
Ways to kind of bring that into relationships or couples I work with. So one is just educating about that, right? What does that look like? What does that sound like? What does that feel like? What does that mean, right? So boundaries are a big way, right? In an enmeshed or undifferentiated relationship, right? One partner is often really taking on the anxiety or the emotions or the feelings of the other, right? The responsibility of the other, right? So it's helping them understand and learn where to put boundaries up so that your partner's anxiety does not become your own. It stays their anxiety or their problem, right? You can help. That's what we're there to do. We're here to support each other, but we're not there to take it on as our responsibility.
Right.
There's a really good anecdote or story I like to tell to kind of help give this a little bit of color. It was this, a couple comes into a therapist's office to talk about their son with a substance use problem, right? And they say, he's living at home, he has no job, he's using all day and all night, whatever it is. He has a problem. Can you help us out? And the therapist goes, he doesn't have a problem. You guys have a problem. And they're like,
oh, snap.
Have you heard this one before? Yeah. They're like, we don't, what do you mean? And he describes this kind of idea of, okay, so imagine that your house is next door to your neighbor's lawn, right? You both got front lawns and your sprinklers go off, but they're always, kind of actually, malfunctioning and going over and watering your neighbor's lawn, right? So to get your lawn watered, you've got to spend all of this extra money on, extra water for your lawns and stuff like that. And so that, you can get enough so your grass doesn't turn brown, right? And you go over to your neighbor and you're, frustrated, like, can you guys pick up some of the slack here? And the neighbor says, I don't see a problem. His lawn is green, right? So to fix this, you need to put a boundary up, right? You need to put a fence in between maybe your properties as an example, right? Keep the water on your side. Well, what's going to happen? Your neighbor's side's naturally going to turn brown. They might get really frustrated. They might be a little annoyed that, now they have to go deal with the problem, but it's now their problem to deal with, right? They have to take the steps, the responsibility to figure out what to do. And if they choose to do it, it's not your problem anymore, right? So in the same way, right, are we enabling our partners? Are we robbing them of their problems is a way I like to put it. And if you really
Robbing
think
them
about
of their
that too,
problems.
yeah, as much as that on the surface seems like it could be a good thing for that person, it's really not, because it's not honoring their agency and autonomy and ability to solve their problems too, right? Like, think about what is the message that you're sending someone when you say they need me to be okay. You are doing it out of love, but at the end of the day, the message you're sending is that they're not able to deal with their problems or learn how to, right? You're really dishonoring their sense of personhood and autonomy and ability to get better and problem solve, right? We need to allow people to have their own problems. So yeah, that's one of the biggest things I kind of educate couples about, right? Is let your partner's problems be their problems. You can help, right? But it's not your response. You're not responsible for their reactions, their emotions, their decisions at the end of the day, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I love that. You're reminding me, I love Alfred Adler. And with his patients, he talked about tasks, differentiating tasks.
Sure.
And he would say, you have to ask yourself, whose task is this? And then and then he's like, if for further clarification, who will pay the consequences if this task goes undone? And it's like, if it's not you, and he's very much like, you can assist, you can support, but you cannot take on their task. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. You have to, and it's hard, right? Especially when maybe you're more empathic. It's painful to you to allow someone to experience whatever pain of consequences there might be. It hurts you to see it because you love them, right? But again, we have to be able to separate that. That's also life, right? We're avoiding that. Life is painful, and we all have our own processes and journeys to go through. And I think this, I'll even say, kind of hits on this point of acceptance in relationships. So I will oftentimes actually see people who kind of come in with more codependent tendencies, do so with this condition of fixing their partner or managing their problems. And, I'm in this because I'm going to save them, fix them, help them get better. And we cannot condition our relationships like that, right? So you're entering a relationship with someone as they are. If they have something going on and they've got a problem and they've got their own consequences to deal with, you have to be okay with that. You have to accept that that's who you're choosing and how you're choosing to enter a relationship, with. If it's not, then it's not necessarily the right relationship for you, right? They're not a bad person. It's not to say that you can't love them and care about them, but it's not the relationship for you. If, you being with them is based on a condition of them changing or getting better, or, something that you need to solve.
Right. Yeah. All right. So you help via education, right? Boundaries, fostering acceptance. Sounds like if it's needed. Any other ways?
I'll add to that too, is helping each individual get a little bit stronger individually too, right? So that might be as simple as encouraging them to kind of strengthen the separate sense of individuality in lives they have, right? Hobbies, social support, getting more connected, right? You often find, some of these couples are really insulated, and just
So
just in each other's
insulated.
worlds, and that's it, right? You need to have more touch points outside of the relationship to, again, have your feet planted, firmly somewhere else, so that you can be in connection, right, with your feet firmly planted. So that, and oftentimes, right, I'll end up really suggesting that each partner is an individual therapy too, right? That's often something that's lacking. We're coming to work on the relationship, something's not working here, we're very meshed. And the partner who's not, sacrificing their own needs, right, has never made the space for their own needs, right? So I, really suggest have your own space, not just this space to solve your couple problems. Have your own space where someone, again, can ask you, what are your needs? What do you want? What do you know? What's going on here? Understanding maybe where some of these tendencies came from in the past. We can do all of this in couples therapy, but I think there's something really symbolic and powerful to having your own space to do it, and that extra hour a week to do it as well, right? We're really helping people start to, again, plant their own 2 feet firmly on the ground so they can come together.
Yeah. Yeah, you remind me, I had a young woman, she reached out for therapy. We didn't start, but we had our initial consultation, and her relationship had gotten to a point where they were together all the time.
Yeah.
All, like, the gym, errands.
Yeah.
Yeah. She wanted to be with him and he wanted to be with her most of the time. And yet, due to conflicts and tensions and some betrayals they'd been through, it just turned into, okay, now we have to be together all the time. And
Yeah.
she, like, yeah, she was looking for an hour. She really was, unconsciously, unknowingly. I sensed she was trying to find a space where, she could breathe, get some air outside of the relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and when I hear that too, right, I hear attachment, right? The sense of I have to be so connected and attached, right? This is an unhealthy form of attachment, maybe anxious attachment, right? Because when I'm on my own and I feel the breeze around me without you, that's really uncomfortable and scary to stand on my own 2 feet. I'm not used to that for whatever reason. That's hard, right? So we build people up to be able to function in the world without someone else as well, right? We do need other people to survive and to flourish and to be in connection, but we also can function without them, and we should, right? We should have a sense of individuality and who we are and a sense of self outside of that addition.
Right. Keep going to that. Both and.
Both and.
Yes. Okay. And for the listeners who, are codependent, have codependent tendencies, patterns, what are some suggestions you have? If they're feeling like they need to make some changes.
Yeah. The first thing I always say, again, across clients, whatever the issue is, have compassion for yourself. Because when I think people start to notice these patterns, or maybe messages are coming from friends and family, right? You're too, codependent here, dependent here. It's coupled with judgment, right? Why am I this way? Why can't I change? I'm weak. I'm whatever it is, right? There's a sense of even splitting, right? Part of me feels like I have to stay connected and do this, and then part of me is mad that I'm doing this to myself, right? It can be so easy to get into self-judgment. So the very first thing I say is have compassion for yourself. As we said earlier, right? You're doing this for a reason. It actually makes sense why you might approach relationships or whatever the codependent pattern is this way, based on maybe how it was for you in childhood, how you were raised, a trauma that happened to you later in life, what you learned through school and through the media, right? There's a lot we can understand about why this is happening and what's going on, so we don't have to be mad about it, mad at ourselves for it. We can have some compassion. This is, something that it's based on what I went through, and I can feel, a lot of empathy for myself, and this is the way I learned to function. Yeah. And then from there, we talk about, okay, things like boundaries, like we talked about before. I often like to talk about, right, building the relationship with yourself. That's the thing. We focus so much on the relationship with the other, we forget that we actually have the opportunity to have a relationship with ourselves, right? So that again comes back to what lights me up, what brings me joy. What would I be doing? What do I want to be doing if I wasn't taking care of someone else, right? We might not have the answers to that because we've just never been in that situation before. It's kind of scary to step out and say, who am I without this other, aspect of being, tied or involved in a relationship in this way.
Right.
Even the comfort of being alone, right, can be really, really hard for all of us as humans, right? We're wired to be in connection and to be, social creatures, but to be alone, and we all experience loneliness from time to time, to be able to actually sit with those feelings rather than do everything we possibly can to avoid them can be really, really helpful and beautiful, right? Where I might bring mindfulness in, right? Can we, when you're feeling lonely or feeling apart in some way, right, actually just sit with that feeling and get to know it. It's hard, but it might not be as overwhelming and painful as you think it is in your head, right? It actually allows us to take some space to actually first of all, connect with the rest of humanity, because loneliness is an experience that we all have. So paradoxically, right, to be alone is a way of connecting with others, but it allows you to connect to yourself then, right? Okay, how can I fill this need with me, right? How can I comfort myself, self-soothe, remind myself, trust myself that I'll be there for me, right? To actually sit with those feelings and get really comfortable with being, alone too. It's an important skill to learn. Yeah.
Solitude.
Solitude. You're really beautiful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then the last thing I'll add to, or just I like to explain, is again, this focus on, this focus on a partner versus a relationship. And I think this was for me, when I kind of referenced my experience and my journey with this, it was unlearning and relearning, right? To focus on what is a healthy relationship, what is the relationship I want to be in, rather than just what is the partner or who is the person I want to be with. And I think this is something that we learn and gets instilled in us through a lot of cultural messages, through a lot of media, is this, fantasy of the one or that person who's going to come along. They're going to be beautiful, or they're going to be really intelligent, or they're going to be complete you, and you're going to have all this stuff in common. And like, that's all wonderful parts of a relationship. Absolutely. You want some sense of attraction and some sense of commonality and whatever. But what we do is we focus so much on this object that this person will come along and we're going to love them. We're going to want to be with them because we think they are so great, right? What happens then is we don't give a shit about what happens with the relationship, right? We're trying so hard to be with them because we think they're right, right? So problems are not, right? This person, we decide to get into this relationship and meet their needs to stay connected with them, rather than saying, what is the relationship I want to be in, right? I want to be in a relationship where someone is also equally focused on my needs. There's equal giving and receiving, where I feel secure and I'm not having to go back and forth all the time. If I, do they like me? Do they not? Whatever it is, right? These are the things I want in a relationship. Now, what people kind of fit that bill, right? And we start focusing on, is this a relationship I want to be in? A codependent relationship is oftentimes not what people want to be in. They just think they want to be with that person, right? So they make those sacrifices. I think that's such a big shift in reframing your perspective to really keep in mind. And that really often resonates with clients when I put it that way.
That is profound.
Yeah.
I'm sure I've heard it.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm hearing it for the first time. Yeah. I remember I was 25. I'd been in therapy at least for 5 years. got rid of the pattern, thankfully, of dating. I dated either sober or active alcoholics.
Yeah.
And yeah, got on online dating. I was there to get married. That was my intention, was finding my husband. And I remember I made a list because who knows what coach or therapist podcast I'd listened to, right? Trying to attract him. But I wrote about
what was the list of him?
Yeah.
Or you guys?
Yep. It was him. Yeah. Yep. Like this tall, yep. This, tall. Yeah. These objective exterior qualities. Yeah. And I'm sure but still, I think it was very superficial, and I wasn't specifying how I wanted to feel in the relationship, how I wanted the relationship to be.
Yeah. And that's the problem, right? And they don't all have to be superficial even, right? You could say that this person is, really generous in the world, right? And giving and charitable, or this person is really, very intellectual, and they're, I'm so smart and I'm learning from them every day, right? And so this person comes along with all of these qualities. All of those can be true, and it can be a shitty relationship, right? So it's not about just focusing on who they are and what they have. It's exactly what you said, Marissa. How do I want to feel in this? Right. What is the relationship qualities that I'm looking for? Yeah, right. It's the same thing. I've made lists like that a million times, and not to say there isn't value in them. They can be a both and here, right? Most of the time when we're making these lists, we're focusing on the person. We're not focusing on the relationship.
Right. So getting deeper, if I did put that he's generous, underneath that, I likely would hope that we have give and take. We do share responsibilities, or like we are able to treat family members to dinners. Like that's what I want the relationship. Or if he's intellectual, we have intellectually stimulating conversations, or we read books and, reflect on them together. Like, again, so getting to how can these potential superficial traits translate into what do you want your relationship to be like? Right now, actually, I am trying to build more community nearby. Cause I tell people I don't have friends because I have my sisters, which is great. But I'm like, I love my sisters, but I need more friends.
Yeah.
And I've said very superficially, I want a girl who's local, who I can get coffee with and go on a hike on an upcoming Saturday. Because I also have best friends outside the area. So they're not here. But now, I'm like, oh man, I don't want to feel in this friendship.
Well, and there's, that's even a whole topic in of itself, right? Different people for different reasons, right? And I have the same thing. A lot of my friends are kind of spread out around California and stuff. So, right, if the need is, I want someone who, when I have that breakup or breakdown or whatever it is, I can call in the middle of the night. You still have that friend, even if they're not local, right? That need is being met, right? And right now, you do need people who are just, to do the fun stuff with. And yet I do like kind of applying this too, right? It's what's important to you in what a friendship even is, right? Are they going to be flaky, right? Or do you want someone who's steady and consistent and will, show up when they say they do, just as one example, right? And this is, spark for getting to explore what's important in relationships and friendships more, right? So when we're talking about relationships, one we don't often think about is, can we fight well together, right? You're going to have conflict no matter what. Same with a friendship, right? You're going to have differences. Maybe one criteria is that we can, respect each other's viewpoints, agree to disagree, stuff like that, right? These are really important qualities in a healthy relationship that don't often end up on the list.
So important. Oh, yeah. I love it. Okay. So have compassion, boundaries, and build the relationship with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, also specify in your relationships how, on a deeper level, how you want to feel, how you want them to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really thinking critically about it. What is the relationship I want to be in? Get to know that about yourself.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah. People are wanting to reach out, join your newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
Where can they find you?
Yeah. So Instagram, just Kim Bielak, last name B as in boy, IELAK, kimbielak.com. Also, you can, if you're in the area and looking for a therapist, you can book a consultation that way, or I have a newsletter, tentatively calling it Therapy Thoughts, name in progress. But I very ad hocly send out, something that I'm thinking about, tools, tips, or just thoughts on the therapy process itself and what I'm seeing with clients. Like, people love to kind of look under the hood. I don't know if you've probably heard of, maybe you should talk to someone, Lori Gottlieb.
So good.
Really
I met
good
her.
book. But people love it because, right, they're able to see under the hood a little bit. So yeah, I love to write. So sign up for the newsletter if you're interested in just getting some of that. And yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Okay. We will put links to all of that in the show notes.
Cool.
And yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks for having me, Marissa.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Hey, girl. It's Marissa again. I'm not like a regular podcaster. I'm a cool podcaster, right? Thank you for listening and staying till the end. You can find me on Instagram at Therapy with Marissa. Email me, marissa@codependummy.com. Check out codependummy.com for more information on the show. And baby girl, a subscribe, rating, and review would be much appreciated. Till next time, I want you to remember, if you are feeling unseen, I see you. If you are feeling unheard, I hear you. And if you think that you don't matter, know that you matter to me. I want you to go out there so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. And now, the disclaimer. Girl, this is not therapy, and I am not your therapist. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regards to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, publisher, or guests are rendering any legal, clinical, or other professional service. If you want or need a professional, please find one.